Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us in the last of the 3 webinar series we have on supporting your child to learn. Today we're going to be looking at alternatives to school. I'm Robin Smith, the Telephone Helpline Manager for No FASD Australia, and I can be contacted on 1800 860 613 for any queries relating to FASD. I am joined today by Cheryl.
Hi everyone, my name is Cheryl Deadman. I'm Chair of the Board of No FASD Australia and also the parent of a teenager living with FASD.
Thank you, Cheryl. Christine?
Hello, I'm Christine Brooks. I'm also a board member of No FASD. I'm a teacher and a carer of a teenager with alcohol-related disorders.
Thank you, Chris. And Sophie?
Hi, my name's Sophie Harrington. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for No FASD Australia, and I'll be here today to answer any questions that you may have and direct them to the right person within the group.
Thank you, Sophie. Just before we start too, I'd like to point out that homeschooling and home education are both referred to in this webinar, and they are the same. We are also sending out at the end of this webinar a resource sheet with all the facts on that. No FASD Australia acknowledges and pays respects to the past, present and future traditional custodians and elders of this nation and the continuation of cultural, spiritual and education practices of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. So how do you feel now? School's back and we've just got used to being at home, and for many children with FASD, they're possibly not reacting well to being back at school. I know there are a number of parents that have chosen not to send their child back to school. So today we're going to look at some different options, including the online virtual, Visual Schools Victoria, which was previously known as Distance Education Victoria, offer online learning at home. There is an eligibility criteria which we will have a link for on our resource sheets. There are other online programs available also. There is part-time. While some families have expressed interest in homeschooling beyond coronavirus, not all want to do it full-time, but only Victoria, Tasmania and the ACT allow students to do a combination of homeschooling and school attendance. And then we have the homeschooling. Ellen Brown, the Director of Teaching with Homeschool Curriculum, has said that the website traffic has increased over 4,300% compared to this time last year. She said families who ended up homeschooling post-coronavirus would likely fall into that category. They didn't set out to home educate, but through a series of events, discovered their children were better served by being at home than at school. As Cheryl has homeschooled for a number of years, I'd like to ask Cheryl if she could tell us a little bit about homeschooling.
Thanks, Robin. As I explained in the first of our webinars, our homeschooling journey began not because we chose to, but because there was no school that could meet our son's needs. So with no preparation, we scrambled to get together an education plan for him. This plan covered many areas of the curriculum as possible, with a mixture of hands-on and written work. Our program would be for 2 hours, 3 days a week between 9 and 11, because I knew that our son was unable to cope with anything more at that stage. I would even ring a bell at 9 a.m, which would help our son transfer from morning routine into a school routine. At this very start of our journey, it was important to have routines, and we always had a written daily schedule. As our son's learning plans have changed as he's become older, so have our schedules. Our son was so rigid with routine because this helped him to function during each day. However, things happen in life that mean our routine must change, and this would create a lot of anxiety for him. So we would regularly make subtle changes so that he would eventually get used to them. As our son has developed, I would also allow extra time for an extension on an activity. For example, a lesson about shapes may extend to finding shapes within the home. Then a further extension may be developing a graph to compare the different shapes and the totals of the shapes. Everything evolves as learning styles are developed or changed. We no longer have to ring the bell in the morning, and the actual learning time could be anywhere from 6 a.m. to 5 p.m, depending on the activities we're doing and the best time to do them. We're now going to hear from Christine, who is going to talk some more about schedules from her experience as a teacher and the teenagers she cares for. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Cheryl. I'm going to just talk a little bit about routine schedules and timetables and how important they are. Schedules and routines, or timetables, whichever you prefer to call them, are not only important for all children, they actually like them. It gives them a feeling of control in their lives. Like us, all children need to know what's coming next. It gives them not so many unknowns in their day, and that makes them feel a lot more in charge of what's happening. They are particularly important for children who struggle with organisation, planning, working memory, problem solving, those sorts of areas that are difficult. If the schedule is consistent, the children learn the pattern, so that once the pattern is set, children start to understand, say, for instance, that music comes after lunch, and therefore there's some predictability in their day and less anxiety. And of course, a child that feels secure and stable in their environment will be a much more focused learner, and everybody will be a lot happier and calmer in the learning situation. While routine is very important, someone with FASD may exhibit unexpected behaviours, and it is vital to be ready to make changes at any time. Being flexible is crucial to maintaining a calmer environment, and it's something that we must always have at the back of our mind, that to keep our calmness, we must also be flexible. While learning from home, the routines or timetables need to be tailored to suit your own situation. It's simply not going to work if you take one off the internet and expect it to fit in with your child's learning style or your teaching style. You need to make sure that you make your own timetable to suit your own needs. Your needs are numerous along with your children, things such as your child's moods, whether there are siblings involved, appointments, access to equipment, spaces available, even the weather, and much more things need to be considered. So keep all these in mind when you're planning your daily or your weekly timetable. As a teacher of early primary age children, in my classroom I always provided an easy to read weekly timetable at a clear eye level position. As well as that, each day I had visual activity pictures like the one you're seeing at the moment. These picture icons are readily available online, and I secured them in a strip along the top of the whiteboard. As each activity was completed, the picture would be removed. One of the children would remove them, and this gave them a sense of the day moving on. It also provided them for something to handle, which I know with children with FASD, they love to be able to handle things. The visual activity pictures can be cut up and laminated and then secured on a strip either vertically or horizontally. It doesn't matter how they're secured as long as the child understands how to read a timetable. Timetables don't have to be complicated. Certainly when working from home, they can be far more flexible and basic than the type you just saw before that I would have in the classroom. The one that's on the screen at the moment is very basic, and they can be added to and changed as the day unfolds and as needed, all the time keeping an eye on how your child's behaviour is going. In some situations, working with your child to establish a weekly timetable could be in itself a really worthwhile activity and help build planning and time management skills. It could be something that's part of your lessons. The following one is a very messy, jointly made schedule that I did with my team during school holidays. You can see it's not a school time. And it stayed on the fridge each day. She would cross off at the end of the day what we had done and add to it as needed, and it became her little security. She always asks if we can have our little routines put up, and every week we put up a fresh one, and gave her a sense of control and security. They were very well used, as you can see. They don't have to be super professionally done. This is enough to help your child see what's happening. Don't forget always, before you move into those learning environments, to do a little change from mood, setting up your child ready to learn. Give them some activities like brain gym, where you're crossing the midline, some clapping, music, songs, some exercise that just gets them into the learning mode. Always provide a tidy, clean learning space so that the child is really settled and ready to learn. And then you have your schedule, and these are the points I just want to go over once more. Keep it simple and easy to read. Visual prompts help. All ages, visual prompts help. Be flexible. This is so important. Don't be constantly feeling you've got to stick to what you planned. If it's not working, it doesn't matter. Make sure you put breaks in. The children want to know that they're going to have breaks during the day, and if they know it's only 10 more minutes till they have time to run around and have a drink, they will find it easier to finish off that little activity. Tailor your timetable to suit your own situation. Every timetable will be different because every situation is different. And most importantly, if it's not working, change it. Many thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Chris. That last point that Chris made is something that if you do start to homeschool, you will get to know very well. If it's not working, it's really important to change it. Just got to talk a little bit more now about setting up a homeschooling program. So there can be a lot of anxiety when thinking about just where to start in setting up your homeschooling program. Remember though, that you know your child best, and you'll also get to know yourself a whole lot more when you start homeschooling. Caring about yourself is the essential first part of any plan. No FASD have some wonderful webinars from Eileen Devine that focus on caring for yourself that are really helpful. Then take some time to think about how you'll start your program. Will you have a break to de-school? This is an adjustment period from leaving school to start homeschooling. Maybe this would help to give you time to work through some issues to help to set up for good outcomes. Or would it make it harder to start at all? Knowing your child will help you to make this decision. From there, you can think about the things your child enjoys and is good at. Think creatively about how you can include them in a learning plan. For example, your child may love teddies and have lots of them. They could be weighed and sorted from lightest to heaviest. They could be measured and sorted from shortest to longest. You could help your child to create a story about the teddies. Have a look at the materials used to make them. How do they feel? Which does your child like or dislike? In this activity, you have at least covered maths, English and science. For an older child, an interest could be football, so you could use that as an example. Football trading cards provide a great resource. They can be sorted into teams. Team players can be lined up against each other. Statistics from players can be presented in a graph. Studying statistics of teams can then lead into predictions being made from this information. Studying the history of teams playing in different weather conditions and on different grounds. A graph could also be presented with this information. You can help your child write up a game report, or they may even be able to do this themselves. With these few activities, you've already covered maths, science, English and history. No FASD Australia has an excellent resource called Introduction to Teachers. This has forms to complete regarding your child's strengths and interests and ideas of how they can be adapted for your child to achieve educational outcomes. By using your child's strengths and interests, you are setting up for the best outcome possible. Sometimes, even with the best planned days though, things are not going to go very well. On those days, I'll have a backup plan that is still educational, but will require less mental energy. Something like a games day can still be fun and provide lots of informal learning. Recently, I spoke to Sue White from the Home Education Network. Sue has 3 adult sons who are all home educated. We're just going to listen to that interview now. Thank you for being us today. We really appreciate your time.
Hello, Cheryl. Thank you.
Sue, I know that you've been involved with HEN, which is the Home Education Network, for many years. Would you be able to just give us a brief history of HEN, please?
Certainly. HEN arose from the alternative education movement in the 80s and has been supporting home educators ever since. I've been involved since about 2000 and the movement has just grown since then.
Yeah, I know that I've seen a lot of your work in my time in home education, and it's just really impressive. So what sort of reasons do people home educate their children?
Well, there's a whole expanse of reasons, really. There are at least 25% have children with specific learning needs. There are people whose kids have been bullied, there are people whose kids who are bored, there are people who have religious reasons for home educating, and that's Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, Jewish. So there's quite a spectrum of reasons. But what it boils down to is that parents decide that they can equal or do a better job than school can.
Yeah, great. So, as you know, I've been home educating our son for many years now, and I know that the processes to register have really changed quite a bit since we've started. And some people might find that registration process quite daunting. So, is there something that can be done to help parents through that registration process?
Yes, certainly. It can look daunting to begin with, but it really involves, some basic information about you and your child, plus the preparation of a learning plan, which is not as daunting as it sounds, although the exact requirements vary across the states. But that information is available through our website. The Home Education Network operates predominantly in Victoria, but we also have some basic information on the other states.
Yeah, great. So when people ask me about home education and the curriculum, they're often shocked that we're not sent out a nice little neat package with everything that we'll ever need. Can you explain the different styles of home education that families use?
Certainly. Now, what you're hearing from people is often people confuse home education with distance education. In distance education, you're basically signed up with a remote school who sends you the work. It is similar to remote learning that families have been doing during the COVID crisis. With home education, you take the full responsibility for your child's education. You do have to answer to the department or the registration body in your state, but you choose what they're going to learn, you choose how you're going to present it, you do any testing that you feel needs to be done. So it's all up to you. And then within that, there are a whole lot of different styles that people use. Some people do follow the state curriculum or the Australian curriculum. Others follow a Montessori or a Steiner or a Charlotte Mason approach, and a whole range of others. And some do project work, and there are also what we call unschoolers, which means in some ways the word can put people off. Unschooling can sound like you're not doing anything, but what it really means is you're just educating in a way that doesn't resemble school. So it's more of an organic or, a way where learning really becomes part of your lifestyle.
Yeah, and I have seen that work really well. Do parents or carers need any qualifications to home educate their child?
No, they don't. And that again it's a question that's often asked, right up there with the socialisation question that you get asked all the time. But the funny thing is that often teachers, for example, they come into home education very confidently because they know about education and they assume that their skills will transfer very well into home education. And they find that they actually have to unlearn a lot of things in order to home educate, because educating one or even up to 5 or however many children you have at home is a very different experience to educating a classroom full of children.
Yeah.
So and the other thing is that there's some interesting stats and research now on the outcomes, and it turns out that lower educated parents actually do quite well in home education, or their children do quite well in home education, and there's evidence that suggests that those children, that there is a connection between parental education and children's outcomes in school, but not in home education. And some of that evidence comes from the departments themselves.
Yeah.
So it is, yes, I think more research needs to be done in that area, but it's quite fascinating.
I could really understand that, because we had a similar situation in our own family where I'd never understood fractions growing up. And so when I was teaching them with my son, I was learning at the same time. And it was a real wow moment for us both. So I could actually understand how that could work. Yeah.
Mm.
So how do families work out a curriculum to meet their requirements?
Okay, well, the first step is to check what the requirements in your state are, and they do differ across the states. In some states, you must follow the state curriculum. In other states, there's a more open approach of, as long as you're educating your child, you'll be, that's acceptable. So the first step is check your requirements. The second step is to really think about your child. What are they good at? What do they like doing? What's their style of learning? And then there are lots of Facebook groups and home education groups that can help with what do I need to do to actually register. And the Home Education Network does run how to register sessions for Victoria and can put people in touch with other support groups in their state.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So as FASD is such a complex disorder, would it be possible for HEN to work with the student's parent or carer to develop the best possible learning plan for the student?
HEN offers, we check people's learning plans to make sure that they will pass, and to give feedback on resources that might be helpful and so on. But I think it's important to note that every child is an individual, and it's not like you have this, you've got a child, we've got a program, because the beauty of home education is the ability to tailor it to your child. And I think parents need to give themselves more credit for knowing their child, for knowing what works for their child. I know with my own experience dealing with schools that when you have a child who's different, you spend an awful amount of time at the school in meetings. You negotiate some sort of allowance for them, which is going to happen after the holidays or after the school production or after the swimming program. And often things don't eventuate, or they finally eventuate and it's just the end of term. So parents spend all this energy trying to advocate for their children and what they need. In home education, you can actually get on with it. You know what they need. You can write the program. We're happy to help you, but give yourself some credit for what you know.
Yeah, well, that's such good advice. And I know there will be so many parents and carers of children with FASD that will just be nodding their heads furiously, because that really fits perfectly with how it is for a lot of children with FASD. And I know myself that quite often there's something that my son hasn't picked up, and you can spend more time on it. So you can actually adapt that program. So that's fantastic. So over the past couple of months, many children have been learning remotely at home, which may have prompted families to consider home education. Are you aware of an increase in inquiries?
Absolutely. We're getting quite a lot of traffic from people who have been remote learning. Some of them are concerned about the virus and just don't feel it's safe to go back at the moment. There's a whole lot of others who either they're realising that their children were behind and they never knew, or they're just loving home education. And there's kids who have just thrived without the distractions of the classroom. And even the Education Minister in Victoria is commenting on that. He's hearing it from every principal, apparently, that there is just this cohort of kids who find learning at home a whole lot easier and are re-engaging with learning.
Wow, that's amazing. So with your extensive home education experience and the FASD knowledge that you now have, What advice would you offer parents or carers at the beginning of their home education journey?
Well, I think flexibility is really important, that no matter what plan you come up with, be willing to accept that you have bad days, you have good days, not to beat yourself up over it, to be willing to give a bit of movement with, you've got 365 days of the year. You don't have to home educate in school hours, on school days, not even in school terms. You can spread your learning out. So that give yourself permission to do that, rather than feel really stressed about today. If today is stressful, tomorrow's a new day. And even, I think I really had to learn at the beginning that a bad 5 minutes does not make a bad day, and it doesn't necessarily make me a bad parent or a failure as a human being. Because I think as parents we tend to load all that on ourselves sometimes.
Yeah.
And apart from the flexibility, I think, it's a big worry when you move to home education that you might be giving up your life, and you worry that you'll never have a spare minute again. I know that was certainly a worry for me, and I was coming out of a very stressful situation with kids in school who were having meltdowns every day. And I thought, well, that's it. This is what I've got to do. But, could be 20 years before I got time to have a cup of coffee. But surprisingly, the stress of having kids in school who aren't fitting in school is very exhausting on mum, dad as well, but often on mum. And the pressure of all that, with that gone, I have found that home education has not only opened up new opportunities for my children, but it's actually given me back my time as well.
I would agree with that totally. Absolutely. Over many years, you would have come into contact with a lot of families just embarking on the adventure of a lifetime of home education. From all of these contacts and the knowledge you have gained from them, do you have any secret strategies for self-care for parents and carers?
Well, I think the secret strategy is to be kind to yourself, and not to expect yourself to be a perfectionist, or don't expect to get everything perfect. Give yourself permission to get things wrong. If you think, there is this big worry about, am I covering it all? But when you look at schools, they aren't covering it all. Even if you look at, everything in the curriculum, if you wanted to replicate that at home, you're still not covering it all, because human knowledge is ever expanding. And even if you teach everything they teach in school, the kids won't necessarily learn it. They're not necessarily learning it in school. Just because something is taught doesn't mean it's learned. And even if a child sitting in school learns everything there, some of it's out of date before they graduate. So if you instill a love of learning in your children, and go with their interests, it can really free them and free you.
Yeah. Sue, thank you so much. You've given us such invaluable information today, and we really appreciate your time.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
For joining us today. Thanks so much, Sue, for that priceless information. I'm going to talk now about a few ideas that you could include in a homeschooling learning plan for someone living with FASD. I've been homeschooling our son for several years now, and in that time, I've seen a huge increase in the amount of online educational programs that are available. They can be an important part of your child's education. However, I would strongly recommend caution and time limits with screen time, as it is very addictive and a real problem for those with FASD. I recommend reading a book called FASD and the Online World. As well as many online programs, there's a vast range of educational workbooks to choose from. Because a lot of children with FASD can be overwhelmed with a lot of information on a page, I recommend using workbooks that are in black and white, as well as information being spaced out. You can also photocopy worksheets from the book and cut them up into sections so that your child does not become overloaded with the information. To set up for success, it's a good idea to start off with work that you are confident your child will be able to complete easily, no matter what year level it's at. Thinking about what type of lessons help your child to learn is a great way to set up for success. It may be that your child can learn easily if the lessons involve animals, for example. Our son loves humour, and incorporating this into his learning plan provides great relief for us both, as we have a good laugh together. This slide shows some examples of educational books with humour. We just go to the next slide. Thanks, Robin. Thank you. Often children with FASD need some sort of meaning in order to learn. The maths books in this slide have real problems to solve relating to a career. Nature has an endless supply of resources from which to learn. It's also probably one of the best opportunities for incidental learning. Counting trees, reading signs at a park, making patterns out of leaves. These are all great activities that are just happening on an excursion. Your child can keep a nature journal to record findings and anything else that they would like to record. Keeping it simple is the key for them to remain engaged. Social thinking workbooks are a great way to help your child develop these skills. They can also be great for the whole family to work on together. Puzzle books that your child enjoys are great for days that are a real struggle. Your child, for example, may like mazes. You can download mazes and other puzzles from the internet or purchase books. Educating a child with FASD is very challenging. You will need to be with your child or nearby and available. This needs to be said so that it prepares parents and carers to set up for success. There are many different styles in which to educate your child. You'll probably need to experiment a little to find what suits your child. But with all the bumps and pitfalls along the way, it can also be a turning point for the positive for both your child and your family. Regulation is one of the key ingredients, and something that I really loved when I first started homeschooling our child was this book that you're seeing now called The Out of Sync Child Has Fun. It has some great regulating activities that can be included into your schooling day. Just going to talk a little bit now about financial options, because we often know that families that know that homeschooling would be the best option for their child and family, but financially it would be really tough. Here are some options that may help families in this decision making. Firstly, there's a scheme called Assistance for Isolated Children. This can be applied for a child who has a special educational need. Secondly, COVID-19 regulations have seen many parents being able to work from home. This may be an option that could be used so you could still be at home and earning an income at the same time. Finally, if the child has an NDIS plan, a support carer may be able to be incorporated into the plan to come during non-school hours so the parent can work during that time. Back to you now, Robin.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. And now, Sophie, have you got any questions for us?
Hi, Robin, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, everyone. I have got a couple of questions here. So I know we're sort of getting close to time. So, Chris, one of the questions was for yourself around mentioning about the brain gym and crossing over the midline. Can you give us a bit more information about this, or is there a link that will be sent that we can have a look at, please?
Well, there's a lot of information online about Brain Gym. Brain Gym's been around for a long time. It's like a series of exercises or activities where you're actually touching the midline, or touching the acupuncture pressure points, and then moving your hands or legs and tapping on either side of your body. This helps activate both sides of the brain, and it's really important when learning to write from one side of the page to the other, reading across, following one side of the page to the other. It helps your brain move across the midline, and that's so important. It also just gets that brain ready to learn, and it does make a difference. So there's a lot of information about brain gym on the internet.
Great. And can I just confirm for everybody that there will be a link to one of the websites within the articles that we send you afterwards. Thank you, Chris. This has partially been covered, Cheryl, but somebody was asking, just from listening to Sue and your talk as well, but just asking a question again around how you manage, if you're happy to share that is, around how you manage sort of self-care time. And yeah, you both, yourself and Sue, I heard you say that you did manage that quite well and you have some free time, but is there anything else you can add for our listeners today on that?
I think the most important thing is to start early with self-care. It was not something that was high on my list when I first started homeschooling. I was just very focused on what our son needed and wanting to make sure I was ticking all the boxes, and I did put a lot of stress and pressure on myself. So that's why I do say in there that it is best to take that time to get yourself in a really good place first. Following on from that, doing funny things. It can really break the ice, and there will be days where you just can't seem to do anything right. And it does a lot to how you feel about yourself, but you really need to do something to bring things back to a place where you can start to relate really well with your child again. I have been many animals, for instance, and that, I've made animal noises. Sometimes that has been the best way to break the ice, just depending upon the developmental age of your child, perhaps. But it can be reading a line out of a funny book, jokes. They are really, really good. But it's about finding something that works with your child, that works with my child. It may not work with anybody else's child, but wherever you can find somewhere that you can get a moment for yourself. I wouldn't look for the big things. I'd just look for the little moments, because they are going to be more manageable to achieve, and you won't feel so down on yourself